Hey there, this is Natalie, and it's time to get into ReZero Arc 7, Chapter 8. Tappei released this one slightly later than his usual upload time, which is at 1 AM for him on the days he has a new chapter ready, and so we were expecting this to be a big one, and it did not disappoint. I'll talk about thoughts on it at the end, but for now, other than a quick reminder that I'd really love it if you subscribed, let's get straight into Arc 7, Chapter 8, which Google Translate says is called Name Front, but probably isn't. The now customary flashback at the start of the chapter this time begins with the first appearance in this arc of a phrase all ReZero novel readers are accustomed to.
Silver bells, silver bells.
This is the first one of these flashback sequences with Emilia, and she's watching Subaru do some cleaning. This scene seems to take place between arcs 2 and 3, because they mention the recent fuss over the demon beast, and Puck is still here with Emilia. This flashback is mostly Puck teasing Subaru in the manner of being fatherly about his interest in Emilia, and like most of the more jokey, bantery dialogue, it doesn't translate well in the machine translation, but it's probably going to be a cute exchange when it's been properly translated. The main point of the scene, though, is Emilia praising Subaru, and this encouragement making him resolve to keep on working harder due to his love for her. As we return to the present for the main part of the chapter, Subaru is remembering this and thinking about how it's painful to remember his feelings for Emilia now. It's the day after the last chapter, and he's working on the stockpile again. Louis is watching him, and he tries asking her if it's time to reveal her true nature as a Sin Archbishop, but she just stares at him blankly, still in her same toddler-like state. He figures Louis is following him around instead of Rem because Rem's legs are still recovering, so she doesn't move around much. But he's troubled by remembering what Rem said the night before about not being able to smell the witch on Louis. Subaru can't think how someone can not have the miasma when they're definitely involved with the witch cult. He thinks about people who gave him trouble in high school and wonders what they're doing now, comparing the general air of low-key bullying and the less than friendly reception he gets around the Imperial camp. But as he leaves the tent to move on to the next one, Jamal, the guy whose people were beaten up by Rem when the three of them were captured, trips Subaru over and stomps on his bandaged up hand, which was starting to heal. Louis clings onto Jamal's leg, but she's light, so this doesn't stop him. Jamal grabs Louis by the hair, noticing that she's just a kid, and flings her to the ground. Subaru gets frightened by this, worried more that it will trigger Louis to reveal her true nature than anything, but she just screams. Jamal says it doesn't matter that she's just a kid, he doesn't like them or that other woman, meaning Rem. He kicks Subaru hard and it makes him bite the inside of his mouth so he can taste blood. Subaru mentions Todd, but Jamal says he's higher up than him, so even though he might listen to his requests, he doesn't have to comply. He kicks Subaru again in the stomach and talks about how Rem attacked his men, and how if he hadn't had that knife with him, he'd have been killed. Subaru realises, as Jamal keeps attacking him, that his goal isn't to hurt Subaru so much as to provoke him into fighting back, so he'll have an excuse to kill him. Clearly there will be problems for Jamal if he just kills Subaru without that. He realises he has to endure it without fighting back, so that Jamal doesn't instead turn his malice towards Rem, who can't fight in her current condition. Luckily, Todd shows up and Jamal backs off before things get any worse for Subaru here. He does kind of think about how Rem might well have started it with his men, but at the same time he thinks it's not her fault because she doesn't know anything. He asks Todd if Rem's okay, saying he hopes she's doing better than he is, and he says she'd been helping with the cooking because it's work she can do sitting down. He asks about Jamal, and Todd explains the ranking system in the Volachian military. I'm going to explain it here based on how it's explained in the X4 novel, which also includes this information, because I've read that in English and so it's a bit clearer. So if you've also read chapter 8 with a machine translation, don't be confused if I seem to have picked up stuff that wasn't really clear there. In the Volachian military, there are 3 levels of generals, which are above the normal soldier and private ranks. The rank of General First Class is reserved for the 9 strongest people in the military, and they're known as the 9 Divine Generals. This is based on talent, and so Todd says that for normal people like him, General Third Class is the highest rank they tend to aim for. Incidentally, I'm in the process of making a video series about the X4 novel, which has plenty more about the Divine Generals and Volakia in general, and so I should have the first one of those up over the weekend, so look out for that. It seems that Jamal is at that rank of General Third Class, but Subaru doesn't think he has the air about him that he'd associate with a general in his world. Todd talks about treating Subaru's now re-injured hand, but Subaru says he wants to see Rem first. Now the scene changes to later, after he's received his treatment and done some more work, and he and Louis are at a table in the tent where people go to eat, having lunch. There are plenty of other people around. They talk about how Rem helped prepare the food, and Subaru asks how it felt in her body, perhaps thinking about whether her skills from before might have begun to come back to her as she worked. She says it's hard to say. Then she says that she can tell for sure that Subaru knew her before, but that no matter how many times he calls her Rem, she can't accept it as her name. She says maybe it would be different if Louis said it, stroking her. Subaru, though, is determined that Louis will not be speaking. Now Todd comes to join them at their table, and Subaru asks if he wouldn't rather eat with his friends, but he says he's known them for years and they won't miss him for one lunchtime. Todd notices that Subaru seems to be communicating with Rem more easily than yesterday, and asks him subtly in his ear if they'd had a reconciliation, but Subaru says that it's more like his sincerity has begun to be accepted a little. But Rem says she can hear them, and Subaru is wrong. Todd talks about how he's depressed about missing his fiancée, who's in the Imperial capital, and this makes Subaru feel guilty. He thinks about how he showed gratitude to the masked man by not telling Todd about him when he asked about the knife, but he also thinks he should show some gratitude to Todd, who needs to find these people of Sudrak so he can go home, considering Todd has helped him too. Subaru carefully asks what they'll do when they find the people of Sudrak, and Todd says that they're supposed to be a powerful tribe, and the intention is to negotiate with them. Subaru asks what they want to negotiate about, and Todd says he doesn't really know, probably something to do with obedience to the Emperor. Subaru wonders then if it might be safe to give them information, and whether it could be that bloodshed would be avoided. But at the same time, he doesn't think he even has all that much information, and it would mean revealing he's been lying about his own identity. Subaru starts asking about their plans, and Todd says that they know how much they can cover in a day, and will start as soon as all of the bases are set up. But Subaru says they can't go fast because it's a big forest with monsters around. He's thinking about how there's the hunter, the masked man, the snake, and all of the traps that Rem set, and thinking maybe he should at least warn them about the traps, but he realises Todd is staring at him. Todd asks if he just said there was a witchbeast in the forest. He says that they wouldn't expect to see them this far south from the border with Lugunica. Subaru doesn't know what to say to this, but Todd asks Rem, and she says she doesn't know what a witchbeast is, but she saw a giant snake with dark skin, and confirms when he asks if it had a horn on its head that it did. Todd is panicked by this and says it changes things, and thanks them for the warning. Todd gathers the other soldiers to take this information to the general, and Subaru is left surprised by the idea that witchbeasts are rare in Volakia. He'd gotten so used to them being a factor in all of the things that had happened to him in Lugunica that he'd thought that in this world, monsters were just everywhere, like in an RPG. He's also just found out that here, Lugunica's known as the demon beast power. He thinks about Mei Li and wonders if here she could have just been a normal child. He picks up Louis at Rem's request, and Rem stands up with the help of a cane, and he thinks about how uncomfortable he is with all of the lying he's having to do at the moment. He hopes that telling Todd about the snake won't have any bad outcomes. As they're walking and talking though, Rem says something that surprises Subaru. She says she finds it hard to trust Todd, because it's hard to trust someone who doesn't ask for your name. Subaru realises that Todd has just been calling him you the whole time and hasn't asked his name. Subaru wonders if that's just some etiquette of the Empire that they don't know about, but thinks how hard it is to get past Rem's stubbornness. Now it cuts to the next day, and Subaru is woken up by Todd, and because this idea of Rem's was troubling him, he tells Todd his name. Todd asks if he was bothered by being called you, and Subaru said no, he doesn't care. He just thought that he might have been being taken as rude for not giving his name yet. But what Todd actually wanted was to tell Subaru the good news. When he told the general about the demon beast in the forest, it was decided that they would change strategies, and this means Todd will be able to go back home to his fiancée. This is such good news that they do a little excited dance, and Rem, who is just really no fun at all anymore, tells them to be quiet. Now she mentions that she can smell something weird, other than Subaru, and it becomes apparent what it is as Todd shows them outside the tent. The whole of the forest is on fire. When Todd told the general Subaru's information, they decided that if there was a demon beast in the forest, the negotiations with the people of Sudrak who didn't obey the Emperor were no longer important. The solution was to burn the whole jungle, and the people in there with it. Subaru is horrified, saying he thought that they didn't want to fight the people of Sudrak, and Todd says that no, he didn't want to fight them because he didn't know how big a sacrifice he'd have to make. It seems like it wasn't that they didn't particularly want the tribe not to die. As Subaru thinks of how now the hunter, the masked man, and everybody in the forest has been burned to ashes, Rem makes him feel even worse by saying, "I know you're not bad, but don't touch me." She turns her back on him and heads towards the tent and Louis, but he can't do anything to stop her leaving. He thinks he feels something touch his back, but when he looks around, there's nothing there. But then suddenly he hears a sound from inside the tent, like a child having a tantrum. He goes inside and Louis is screaming and staring at him, but he realises she's staring at him at a weird angle, and at something on his back. He now realises there's arrow feathers coming out of him. He falls to the ground, dizzy, wondering how such a small, thin arrow in his back could make him feel this way, like he's dying. Rem is screaming for someone to come and help, which is reassuring to Subaru, that she cares this much even though she can't trust him, because it means she really still is somewhat kind. Rem figures out that the arrow must be poisoned, since the wound is so small and shallow. He can't move now, and has a high fever. It's clearly a powerful poison. He tries to open his eyes to see Rem, but he notices someone else, about 30 metres from the tent. A small child, similar to Louis, with a murderous look in her eyes. It says it's a small girl covered in soot, with something like a half-bow. He thinks he's deserving of her hatred, since this fire is because of him, as the effects of the poison continue, and it sounds like he's vomiting up his melted organs, his whole body just shutting down. It's kind of like those descriptions of what the Ebola virus does to you, in all honesty. And it does seem like Subaru's dying here. With that, the chapter ends. Now, like a lot of chapters that end with an apparent Subaru death throughout ReZero, we can't really be sure that he's going to die here until the next chapter. There are various theories around Louis' current state, such as that she may be the healing green room spirit from the watchtower, and with something like that in play, it's possible that he could get saved at the last minute. However, where Subaru now knows the results of telling Todd about the snake, it may be just as harsh for him not to return by death now, and to have to live with those consequences. Personally, I think he will die here, though it will be interesting to see where the save point will be. Since he's been in basically constant danger, and it usually takes him to a point where he was safe, I think it will either be right back to where it was, allowing Subaru to have a different interaction with the masked man now he knows so much more, and perhaps completely changing how things would go, or it will just be back to some time after he'd befriended Todd. However, since Return by Death doesn't seem to care about saving anyone except Subaru, I could see it being one of those like Arc 5, where he gets returned to very recently, after he told Todd about the snake, and where he'll have to try to stop them burning down the jungle after that's already been decided. This little girl seems to be a different person to the other hunter, given she uses different arrows, and Subaru did see the other hunter at a distance fighting the snake, and he thought it was a man. So I think maybe they're both from one of the forest tribes we now know are a thing, whether they're the people of Sudrak or some other tribe. And that's about all I have to say for this video. Let me know what you thought of this chapter in the comments, and as always, please subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when I upload more ReZero content, including the summary of Arc 7 Chapter 9 once it comes out. You can also check out my videos about the latest episode of the anime, or my various ReZero theory and analysis videos if you want more ReZero stuff to watch right now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.